people who worked for sketchy employers or businesses. What was your frick this crap I'm out moment? I worked at a burger place in college. It was casual dining, so instead of regular tipping, we had a tip jar by the cash registers. Now, the jar was clearly labeled tips in huge, capital letters. At the end of the night, the cashier would count out all the tip money and place it in an envelope that went directly to the owner. The owner would take all the tips and keep them for himself. He was able to get away with this because he was already paying us minimum wage, so tips weren't legally required. Also, his restaurant was walking distance from the college campus. If any employees got fed up with the system, which many did, and quit, he had a constant supply of broke college kids looking for part-time work to replace the quitters. After a few months of working there, I started recognizing repeat customers. I felt really bad because many of them would make an extra effort to tip because they thought the money was going to us, the workers. There was this kindly retired lawyer who stopped by every week. He would tip me extremely generously. I couldn't handle the guilt anymore, so I politely let him know that the money wasn't actually going to me or any of my co-workers, and that I felt bad that he was tipping us under the impression that it was. The retired lawyer got extremely angry, because I guess there were some pretty serious legal ramifications to what the owner was doing. Because the tip jar had tips written on it, the owner was deceiving the customers. The lawyer spoke with the owner directly and called him out on his bulls. As a solution, the owner replaced the sticker that said tips on the tip jar with a picture of the restaurant logo. He was still able to keep his tip money, but apparently without the legal risk, because technically he was not collecting it under false pretenses anymore since the jar no longer expressly said tips. I quit the next day. Would have been fun to get a friend to fill the jar with mints or something every day since it wasn't clear that the jar was for tips. Watched my boss grab one of my co-workers by the throat and push him up against a wall because he was accused of stealing something. Turned out he didn't steal anything. Was told to pour the water and sediments from core drilling concrete floors in a hospital into the toilets and flush. That way when they clogged the next day we could be hired to replace them. Worst plumbing company ever. My boss took away my breaks, then drink called me one night for having a cup of tea at the end of a long shift. He screamed down the phone at me for 10 minutes. I walked out mid-shift and never came back. I thought breaks were mandatory. Against the law of you don't get a break. I worked for a catering company, first as a server and then as a prep cook. One day I got called in on my day off to help move some doors. The boss had bought 20 heavy wooden doors at auction for no reason but to have some extra doors. I meet her at the auction house. She's standing there with 20 doors stacked up on a giant cart. No van or truck in sight. I need you to take these back to the kitchen. Great. I grab one of the vans and be right back. All the vans are out making deliveries. That's what the cart is for. She wanted me to push 20 wooden doors on a heavy wooden cart up a hill with a 45-degree incline, and then 6 blocks after that, in 90-degree heat. I was so broke at the time that I gave it a shot, because I desperately needed the money. Despite my best efforts, I couldn't get it up the hill. Then, who should show up but the other boss, driving a van. What are you doing here? I'm pushing freaking doors up a freaking hill for your freaking wife, I said inside my brain. Why? He helped me load the doors into the van and drove me back to the kitchen, where I got yelled at for taking too long with the doors. I was gone the next week. My first job when I was 15 was at this Italian sandwich place. The bosses were gigantic buttholes and the restaurant was severely understaffed. We were frequently underpaid and half the employees were undocumented illegal immigrants paid $5 an hour under the table. Why I put up with it for the 9 months that I did I don't know, but here's the story of the day I finally quit. I was in at 8:30 AM prepping and restocking. We opened for coffee at 9 then food at 10, so there was 0 kitchen staff on. This group of 6 dudes came in and asked if we're open and I said no, sorry as you do. They said thanks anyway and started to leave. My boss turned the corner and saw them leaving and he freaked the frick out at the prospect of lost business. He started slamming the fridges and knocked an entire shelf of glassware down and then screamed at me to go run after them and tell them we can serve them. In retrospect I should have just quit right then, but instead I ended up running after them on the side of the road as they drove away in their car. They saw me running and came in, but they were a little spooked that this 15-year-old girl was sent to go chase them down. Anyway, they ended up waiting 50 minutes for their food cause my boss is a piece of crap and we weren't staffed enough to serve them. I quit that shift. Frick that place. Yeah, your boss sounds like a moron. We went 3 pay cycles, 6 weeks, being told our checks were coming, but a bank error had wiped the payroll account and they were working on a loan to cover pay while they got the problem fixed. Everyone was then paid our full back pay, $30K plus in some cases, in cash. I took it and handed in my 2 weeks notice. The boss then gave me my expected pay for those 2 weeks in cash and told me not to come back. The CEO was taking people's food out of the fridge and eating it, then proceeded to write a long descriptive apology email to the entire company about how good it was. LOL, that dude is a professional dong. When I wised up and did some research into a state law that my boss claimed required clients to give us certain personal information, no such law exists. He was literally lying to clients' faces and having all of his employees do the same. Oh, and he was scamming the elderly with seemingly no remorse. He's currently being sued by elder law attorneys in 3 separate cases. Worked at a well-known food chain. In the short few months I was there, they threatened to sue me for putting a picture of a burger on my Facebook wall. They were literally stalking an 18-year-old kid. Various health code violations. No heater or air conditioning. Employees were getting sick from the heat and weren't allowed to go home, even after some passed the frick out. CEO tried to stick ambulance bills on anyone requiring medical assistance after the restaurant caught on fricking fire. Whole bunch of other crap, but this next one takes the cake. The restaurant uses reusable cutlery plates etc. Well, they are apparently very expensive, and if you took the garbage out, you got the privilege of digging through the garbage for said items, and you were not given gloves to do so, since the restaurant didn't have them to reduce waste. If you refused to do so or you missed any, the manager would come stomp the bags with their foot to check. You would be written up. This is a company-wide policy. The franchise in question treats their employees like crap. Can you at least tell us so we do not eat there? When my boss at the supermarket deli asked me to crawl into the large compactor dumpster to pull out expired meat, scrape the expiration dates off of the packages, and sell them. Freaking call health management, dude, that is freaking horrible. During my first shift, the manager made me drive a cart thing even though I told him that I never drove anything before and then got mad at me when I crashed it. I ended up quitting after 3 weeks because one of my co-workers kept harassing me about wanting to have a threesome with me and my partner, and my manager refused to do anything about it because he is a good kid and wouldn't do that. Leave any place where you feel uncomfortable. Working at a nightclub, GM wanted me to fill Grey Goose bottles with Mr. Boston vodka to sell to people after they'd been drinking. He dropped and shattered a bottle of Patron. Then he wanted to use a strainer to put the glass shattered tequila into an open bottle at the bar. I got a below minimum wage check for 2 weeks. I was working my butt off. I said go frick yourself after confronting him about the check. Never came back and they were out of business like 2 months later. That's the quickest way to lose a liquor license. Was homeless and desperate to get back on my feet. Applied at sandwich shop in a mall. Interviewer looked at application, looked at me, said, "You go home and change. Come back. We'll put you behind counter. See how you do." Ecstatic me. Am I hired? Number. We just try you out for little. See how you do. Left and did not return. In mall a few days later, he came over to yell at me about not showing up for work. Dude, frick you. You didn't hire me. You just wanted free labor for a day. I'm not an idiot. Walked away. First our paychecks bounced. We got paid cash the next day. Then a week later the electric company turned off the power for not paying the bill. I quit the next morning. Yeah, I'd imagine if your company is so far in the red that you haven't paid your electric bill in a long enough period that they're shutting off service, it's not surprising that paychecks are bouncing as well. I'm curious where they got the cash to pay employees the next day though. I worked at Beachside Bar for a little bit last summer and the dude who ran the place was sketchy as frick. He told me to do all kinds of shady things that would get any business shut down in a heartbeat. He said if someone came to the bar and slid a $20 towards me to not check their ID and serve them regardless. He said if I saw a beach cop come by to hide any bottles on the counter down below the well by the drainage grates. He dropped a burger on the floor while grilling it, picked it up, put the SHHHH finger over his mouth and kept grilling it. He would sometimes take deliveries through the back door and tell me I wasn't allowed to be in the back room when he was taking the delivery. Always hid the boxes away before telling me I could go back in. The guy was sketchy as frick and I never got answers for his shadiness. The final straw for me was when he backed his car into another car parked in his lot and told me to write a note apologizing for hitting the car and a number to contact for reparations. He told me to write down my name and number and that he would pay me back for any money I had to give to the victim. I worked there for about 15 minutes after that, then left and never came back. My boss asked me to help him commit insurance fraud. I was working for a large Ford dealer in MA and the parts department was prone to flooding. This day was a flood day. My boss walked around gathering up all of the expensive items that we'd been stuck with over the years and threw them into a shopping cart. He instructed me to push the cart outside and spray everything down with a hose to mimic flood damage. I refused. What makes this worse? Ford has multiple ways of returning old stock, especially if this happened back when PIP was still a thing. And a good MGR keeps an eye on his stock and doesn't keep parts past 12 months of no sale. So he had many opportunities to rid himself of old stock without resorting to fraud. When I was asked to roll over hours to other part-time employees to other pay periods to avoid fines, despite being understaffed and I myself being part-time as well. Never work in radio, kids. What the heck? My boss asked numerous times to come in on a non-scheduled day and place the hours during the next pay period. Those hours got denied every time. Essentially it was free work. Asked for me to get information on the competition and report to higher ups. Boss would forget to inform me of a meeting and tell the higher ups that I was lazy and didn't want to attend. The final straw. I had multiple out-of-state interviews for grad school. Time off did not get denied, but the boss said we expect you to be at work on the days off I requested. The request was placed 2 months prior. Worked in an outsourced call center for a major Australian telco, the market leader, back when landlines were more widespread than today. Outbound warm calling sales, i.e. calling people who already had an account to cross-sell, was put onto a project to sell broadband internet. 70% of the customer list supplied for this campaign was over the age of 75. That's not just the people we got onto, that was the original list. Lots of variants of what's a computer and lots of people that were too senile to conduct their own business affairs under any circumstance, especially over the phone. First job out of uni was as an events manager, planning a new event in North Wales. I worked for 10-12 weeks on the planning and development, until I got to the point where I needed to start paying for marketing materials, booking contracts, deposits, etc. Then found out the guy behind the company was trying to get £500k government funding to put the event on, funding that was on the basis of like-for-like spending, match funding. Put my finance request into the boss, who said we don't have any money to spend until we get the funding in. I pointed out the funding was on a matched basis. He said don't worry, we can make it look like we spent our £500k and get the funding for nothing. Nope, out of there. Yeah, glad you got the heck out of there. I worked for a mortgage lender in 2006 for a couple months before I couldn't take it. The high earner in the company in sales was a 23-year-old who made $43k the last month I was there. My job was to take people's info and pass it along to the brokers, which is where I hope to be in a few months' time. Then I started hearing the stories like the one about people who just bought a house 6 months ago with a $3,500 mortgage. The father is the only one working because of kids at home and he makes $3,800 They're 6 months in and trying to refinance just to pay bills for a mortgage they never should have gotten anyway. The broker's reaction is basically, send them to me. I'll bet we can get 18% interest on this one. Meanwhile the mom is on the phone with me crying. Not sure how they got in this mess to begin with or who is going to take care of the kids when she has to get 2 jobs. TL. DR. Frick predatory lending. I worked with a subcontractor remodeling bathrooms for major stores up and down the East Coast. They were considered the best team, so got a lot of the jobs. My wife was friends with the crew leader's daughter, so he brought me along for one summer. It turns out they were so good because they would take a lot of drugs that allowed them to never sleep. They would get a week's job done in a couple days, which made for really good money, so I stuck around. I had to bow out when they started shooting up H in the hotel room. They would then bring the needles to the hotel management, claiming they were left in our room in an attempt to get a refund for the room to save even more money for themselves. Talk about an unsustainable work ethic. When I took the job, it was for $14 an hour. Then it became $10 an hour a week later. Then my hours got capped at $20 a week, but I was still expected to come as much as needed. That's when I quit. Took them 3 months to finally pay me $400 for 100 hours of work. Restaurants can be sketchy as frick. Worked for the worst company that was running a premium rate telephone help desk service and selling free antivirus software. They charge £3 a minute for every call, with a £2 connection fee. Before even beginning to help the customer, we had to run through a full script and take their details. It was engineered to take at least 5 minutes, but we were told to stretch it out, of course. So the customer had to pay a minimum of £17 before even describing their problem. Every call would cut off after 18 minutes exactly, and if the customer wanted to continue they had to call up again, pay the connection fee again, and go through the script again. On top of all this, the company had engineered Google search results so that they would be the first link if you searched for something like Facebook helpline or Microsoft official phone support. They did this for about 50 big name brands. Every call would be engineered to steer them towards needing antivirus on their computer. They even made us use lines like, "The reason you're locked out of your Xbox profile must be that you have a virus on your computer and it was infected your whole wireless network." Then we'd sell them the antivirus software that was available for free on Google and install it for them using TeamViewer Remote Desktop. Sketchy in itself. We sold that free software for £99 per download. Not even per house or per person. Per download. On top of that, the engineer using Remote Desktop to install the software would insist that installation would take a while and the customer should go put the kettle on. Then they would use the time to steal information from the customer's computer. The absolute worst and most despicable company I have ever worked for. And I have worked for some dang shady companies. The owner had several other companies like this, too. I work in IT. I have to clear up the mess these companies cause. Please name and shame these cockwimbles. I quit a job just yesterday because the boss was sketchy, and I didn't want to be a part of it. I only worked there for about 3 weeks before I realized that I had been hired to be a minimum wage punching bag for customers. Figuratively, it was at a hotel, the most expensive hotel in my small town, so people thought they were getting quality when they reserved a room. When I made reservations over the phone, I was required to claim that all of the rooms had ocean views. More than a third did not. Their credit cards would not be charged until they checked in. A lie. Once the boss got their credit card info, he would run it whenever he felt like. And a couple of other minor things, like that the fish in the restaurant was freshly caught from the freezer section of Walmart. In addition, the owner of the hotel would not authorize any refunds, upgrades, discounts, etc. at all. So, that doesn't seem too bad, right? Except that when customers arrived to their $218 a night room and realized that they did not have the ocean view promised, or that their card was charged without authorization, or saw that there was something wrong their room, what did they do? They came down to the front desk to yell at the manager. The manager owner would refuse to speak to these people. So they would stand there flipping out at me while the owner hid and counted his ill-gotten gains until they left. I noped right out of there as soon as I realized what an unethical shat he was. Worked with the mentally disabled and the manager was stealing food and money from them. I turned her into the office. She just got yelled at, asked to transfer, because I couldn't be an assistant to someone who went against my morals. Turned her into the state as well. Nothing happened. Went to a new house under a different director, and after a year of being at that house, the manager told me I can't transfer to the day program to better fit my needs with hours. The AD told me I didn't need her permission. So I put in my 2 weeks at that house, and when she found out I was going to their day program, she wrote me up for things I didn't do, so I would have to stay at the house she managed. I left that day and never went back. I couldn't work with a company that allowed stealing from clients and was petty. Please create multiple fake accounts to feign popularity of our website. Please engage in a 1-1 message with every new sign up. Sign-ups weren't an issue. There were 1000s. It was the interaction and engagement that the platform struggles with. Having me act out a script and be interacting with myself so you seem busier than you are? No thanks. Please create multiple fake accounts to feign popularity of our website. Sounds familiar. Well, I worked at a tattoo shop. The guy and business were legit, and my boss was a nice guy at first. He had security cameras up, which was no big deal to me cause it's not like I was stealing crap. Well, around Halloween, the owner was friends with this bartender chick and she wanted to bartend topless, but have a jersey painted on her to look like she had a top on. I had no problem with that. What I did have a problem with was him calling in his buddies the next day to watch his security footage of him painting this girl while she was naked. Another time I was working. Next day I quit. He called his buddies in because he had security camera footage of an 18-year-old girl giving him a BJ for a tattoo. He was in his 50s. I was done after that, and the place closed down 6 months later. Frick, this might be one of the more fricked up ones I have read. I worked in a comic book store when I was a kid. The owner was a fantastic guy. The store was in a strip mall and the guys at the Chinese takeout place at the end owned all the stores. This was before everyone used credit cards all the time, so the Chinese landlords would come around and collect the rent in cash. One of the partners at the takeout came in one day and told us that we couldn't pay in cash anymore. It had to be a mail check. One of the other Chinese owners had been telling his partners that some of the stores were behind on the rent, but he was collecting the cash and then gambling it away. Holy crap, that's a business gone bad right there. My very first job, I actually didn't know about or anything. I worked there for a year, until I moved away with my family. I knew it was awful, but there was little employment in my town, and only being 15, very hard to find work, so I stuck it out. It was a small town, like, no stoplights, just a few roads with a few hundred people living there. There was a gas station right off of the freeway exit, with a little cafe attached to it. I worked as a waitress in the cafe. First things first, I was paid under the table. That's fine. Cash instead of checks. I was chill. But I later found out that my manager had been taking out taxes from my checks. Why would you need to take taxes out of my checks if I'm not on the payroll? Anyways, the place was disgusting. The cooks all smoked cigarettes and would smoke while they were cooking. Ashes everywhere. If they dropped something, they'd fry it for a second and then put it back on the plate. Kills the germs, right? They'd fudge the date-made labels, just in case an inspector came. The food would always be good on the stuff we made in the restaurant. Homemade dressings, soups, etc. Honestly though, in the year I worked there, I never saw an inspection take place. I don't know how they would have passed had there been an inspection. The ice machine had like mold in it, I don't know. Dark specks on the ice. It was disgusting. They'd keep the fresh iced tea in the fridge and served it until it smelled weird. It really was a small cafe. There were nights I'd make $5 in tips the whole shift. Could have 1 or 2 tables a night depending on what day it was. So the tea could be in there for a while before they'd need to make more. It was really just gross all around. I really loved some of the people who worked there. They were just making best out of a crappy situation. Like I said, small town, minimal jobs. I was helping support my parents at the time and didn't have a driver's license, so I couldn't get another job in a different town. I recently visited there, though, for the first time in like 10 years. It's under new management and doing really well. It was nice to see that. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.